what we're going to do is we're going to try to ascertain the personality of our website's visitors using two tools: advanced segments and custom reports. First of all, let's talk about how we can slice up our visitors, because there's not one kind of visitor coming to our site. There are a lot of different kinds of visitors. And there are two metrics in Google Analytics that we can use to kind of model how engaged they are. What we want to do is understand how people are behaving on the site and which of those behavior sets or behavior types, or what I call traffic personality types, is resulting in conversions and revenues. So here's the model I propose. There are two indices that we will consider for engagement, and most analytics folks will be familiar with these. We're going to divide our traffic into the famous quadrants, and across the bottom I want to look at average time on site. This is the amount of time that visitors are spending on your website. Across the other one, I want to look at average pages per visit. So the idea here is that somebody who is spending a lot of time on the site and looking at a lot of pages that fall into this quadrant here are probably pretty darned engaged. Whereas those who are only spending a little time on the site and very few pages per their visits are probably not that engaged. In fact, this is the realm of what we call the bounce. When somebody comes to our site and looks at one page and leaves. So imagine what somebody is like if they're coming to the site, spending a lot of time on the site, but really visiting only a few pages. That means they're really reading, but they're not going to a lot of pages. And then finally, we've got those folks who will not spend very much time on site, but are going to visit a lot of pages. So what I do is I give these guys a name. Those that aren't spending much time on the site and aren't visiting many pages, I call them Bouncy Bob. And you're just going to have to forgive me for my corny names, because I'm a scientist, which means by definition I'm not that imaginative. Those that are spending a whole lot of time on the site and a lot of pages and are visiting a lot of pages are being very methodical about their experience with you. So I'm calling them Methodical Marys. Now let's think about somebody who's going to spend very little time on the site but are going to visit a lot of pages. What is their story? Well, I happen to think that they're lost. They're looking for something, desperately looking for something, and we are not giving them what they're looking for. I call these the Lost Lucies. Those who are spending a lot of time on the site but only visiting one page or two pages, these are our one-hit ones. So with two simple metrics, we come up with a kind of a simple model for how we can understand the personalities of our visitors. Now, time on site is measured in terms of seconds or fractions of seconds, and pages per visit is measured literally in terms of pages. So time on site might be something like 2:13, indicating that people are spending on average 2 minutes and 13 seconds. Pages per visit, you might see something like 4.05 pages per visit. We want to see how each of these different personalities are doing. And the question is, what do we use for the line? In other words, what constitutes a high amount of time on site versus a low amount of time on site? And likewise, what would we consider a high number of pages per visit versus a low number of pages per visit? A great starting point for where this line occurs can be found on the main page of Google Analytics. Here's where you'll find the site-wide statistics, including pages per visit and average time on site. So for this particular site, there are 10.93 pages per visit on average, which is relatively high. This is an e-commerce site. And the average time on site is 4 minutes and 41 seconds. Again, that's relatively high for most sites. We're going to take those two numbers and we're going to use those to define our segments to determine which are our Bouncy Bobs, which are our Methodical Marys, which are our Lost Lucys, and which are our one-hit wands. Now we're going to go into Google Analytics and we're going to define segments for each of these four quadrants. And I'm going to show you how to create a segment in Google Analytics. Google Analytics provides a nice segmentation capability. Segments are great because they allow us to look at only certain slices of our visitors or only certain kinds of visitors and determine how things are working for them. It's the Advanced Segments drop-down. When we open this, we get a nice look at the existing default segments. So we can look at all visitors. We can look at only those who are new visitors. This is the first time they visited. We can look at those that are only returning visitors. We can look only at visitors that came through paid search. However, for our personality test, we're interested in the custom segments. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new segment. We're going to give this segment a name, and let's start with Bouncy Bob. As you remember, Bouncy Bob is spending little time on site and is visiting few pages. Now, we would think somebody who's not spending much time on site and not visiting many pages is not going to be very valuable. But what we want to do is make sure that that's true, because every site is a little bit different. So we're going to define this segment, and what we can do is provide a series of rules. First of all, for Bob, we want to include pages per visit. And in the reporting system, or in the segmenting system rather, they call it page depth. This is the depth of pages that Bob has visited. We want this to be less than the median, which was 10.93. I'm going to round down to 10 pages per visit, so a page depth of 10. We're also going to add another metric. We're going to look at time on site. So it's really nice that we can start to type the metric we're looking for, and Google Analytics filters for us time on site. And as you'll remember, we are looking for 4 minutes 41 seconds or less. We want this to be less than 4 minutes and 41 seconds. If we multiply 4 minutes by 60 seconds, we get roughly 240 seconds. So we want the time of visit to be less than 240 seconds. If we wanted to be specific, we would make this 281 seconds. But again, this is a rough estimate of certain personalities of people visiting the site. We roll on down here and we save the segment. And as you can see, we are now looking at just traffic that matches the segment we defined for Bouncy Bob. Now this is interesting. It says 63.81% of total visits would qualify as Bouncy Bobs. That is, 63, almost 64% of the people visiting the site, or the visits to the site, are coming with below average time on site and below average pages per visit. This is actually fairly common. We have a lot of quick hits. This is often considered unqualified traffic, but we're going to make sure that that's correct. We then go on and we define our other segments. Lost Lucy. And Lost Lucy, as you might remember, has a below average time on site, but an above average pages per visit. So the page depth is going to be above 10.93, which we rounded to 10, and time on site is going to be less than 4 minutes times 60 is 240 seconds, and we save the segment. And when we're done, we're looking at both Bouncy Bob and Lost Lucy. Now, Lost Lucy is a much smaller percentage of our visitors. She represents less than 7% of our visits. And look at the differences as we scroll down here. Bob has an average pages per visit of 2.54, while Lucy, on average, visits over 15 pages per visit. And look at the time on site. Bob's visiting for less than 34 seconds, while Lucy's spending more than 2 minutes on the site. Now, visiting 15 pages in 2 minutes matches our assumption, which is that Lucy is hitting a lot of pages in a very short period of time. Let's go on and define the other segments. Methodical Mary has a page depth greater than our average, greater than 10, and a time on site greater than 240 seconds. Finally, there's One Hit One, who's seeing more than 10 pages on a visit to the site, but is staying for less than the average 4 minutes, 240 seconds. Finally, there's One Hit One, who's visiting the site and staying for less than 10 pages per visit, but he's spending a great deal of time on the site, more than average. And here's how they all look on the basic visitors overview. Again, this is the first page you see when you enter Google Analytics, only we've sliced it by Bouncy Bob's, Lost Lucy's, Methodical Mary's, and One Hit Ones. As you can see, Bouncy Bob is the most of the traffic. Methodical Mary is second with 22% of total visits. And if we scroll down and take a look at their statistics, we see that Bouncy Bob has less than 3 pages per visit, while Methodical Mary has more than 35 pages per visit on this particular site. And again, Bouncy Bob, less than 34 seconds on the site, while Methodical Mary is spending, on average, over 15 minutes, almost 16 minutes on the site. So the question is, given this behavior, who would you expect to be your best customers? Who would you expect to be your highest converters? That is what we're going to find out next. Since I'm a conversion scientist, I really prefer to measure things not based on predictive metrics like time on site, what is often called engagement metrics, but I want to know who's buying, or I want to know who's generating more leads. And we're going to use custom reports to create that for us. We click on the Custom Reports tab, and among our reports is one that I've already defined called Personality. Let me show you how that is laid out very quickly. The Personality report tells us about people's behavior on the site, and it includes their behavior all the way through to purchase. So if we drill down on the metrics that I defined for this, unique visitors, visits, pages per visit, average time on site, bounce rate is interesting to us, and then we can get the e-commerce conversion rate, revenue, and the average value, or the average transaction value. So we've defined this, and what we're going to look at is visitor type. So we can slice each of these segments one more way by new visitor versus returning visitor. So let's take a look at this report and see what it tells. This is the personality report. Right now it's giving us information about all of our visitors. We're going to open advanced segments, so we're going to choose our unique segments and apply these to the report. Now we see how the different personalities behave. One Hit One, we can see that he has 5.74 pages per visit and spends about 9 minutes and 37 seconds on the site. Now, because he's hitting multiple pages, his bounce rate is by definition 0. His conversion rate to a purchase is only 0.69%, and he's not generating that much revenue as a percentage. Now let's look down here at Methodical Mary. She is visiting, as we said, over 35 pages, but look at her conversion rate, 3%. She represents a high percentage of the traffic, of the revenue rather, for this site. Bouncy Bob has the lowest conversion rate of all, tied with Lost Lucy. And if we scroll down, we'll get the distinction between new visitors versus returning visitors for each of these segments. So here we can see that One Hit Ones, if they are new visitors, provide a conversion rate of 0.25%. However, One Hit Ones, if they are returning, have a conversion rate of 2.68%. This is significantly higher. Bouncy Bobs, who have basically a 0% conversion rate if they're new, eke out a 0.29% conversion rate if they're a returning visitor. And look at the difference between Methodical Marys. So someone who is a new visitor but spends all of this time on site, an average of just over 34 pages, 14, almost 15 minutes on site, has a conversion rate of 2.2% if they're new visitors. But if they're a returning visitor, huge. They're spending a great deal of time on the site and have a conversion rate that we really like, 7.4%. However, notice that new visitors who are spending less time on site and have a lower conversion rate are actually generating the most revenue. This is an interesting insight. This tells us something about our methodical Marys. What can we do to have more of those on the site? What can we do to encourage more of our one-hit wands to buy? What is it that they're doing if they're not visiting many pages but spending so much time on site? How can we use those pages that they're visiting and spending time on to better entice them to buy our products? These are all business decisions, and they affect price, they affect promotion, they affect brand. And as a manager of an online service, as a manager of a website, we can make decisions about how we go to market based on insights from these kinds of segmentation. I hope that this has been helpful, and if you have questions, please leave them in the comments right below.